Hello, and welcome to another camera review. Today, I wanted to discuss the 50 millimeters. Now, there is a lot of talk about choosing the right 50 millimeters, and for that very reason, I have brought here a few of the lenses that I may use for filming or photography purposes. And these lenses I want to discuss and tell you what I use them for, how I use them, and what makes the difference. And it's mostly not the price that matters, but the fact that they provide a unique look. Because if you look at it, the focal length does not change. But what they can do in terms of rendering an image is what determines my selection in 50 millimeter. Now, I will start with the basics. An autofocus lens 50 millimeter f1.2, a very fast lens from Canon. This is their L series, extremely fast, extremely accurate. Now, as far as the image quality, it is one of their best. But if I were to compare it to other lenses in the market, I would not rank this to be the highest. But in terms of the quality that you get, the colors, it's beautiful. And the reason it's beautiful is that Canon has made a mark in terms of their image quality. And the image quality they give is a very natural color tones. And it's just one of the reasons a lot of people prefer using these lenses. Now, they have been a long-term competitor to Nikon, and I have used Nikon extensively for years. And Canon also has been in the market as their competitor. When it came to cameras, Nikon's used to charge a little higher than the Canons, and that was the reason for that, because they took extra care in producing some of the most phenomenal lenses over the decades. Now, of course, there are other manufacturers like Sigma and Zeiss that are competing for the same market share. And speaking of Zeiss, we have here one of their very best lenses. Is called the Macroplanar 50mm f2. Now, 50 millimeters is a very special focal length because it's one of the most affordable versions and focal lengths of lenses. But more importantly, they give a very different perspective when you are using it. This one, for example, is used for macro, and that's why it's called macro. And you can get extremely close, as much as 18-20 centimeters, to get a really nice image. And that will mean that if you are photographing small objects, plants, nature, it works very well. But also Zeiss does produce the 50mm 1.4. Now, the difference is that it is a little bit more sensitive to light. But if you look at the images, they are pretty similar, especially at other apertures like f4, f5.6. And that is what makes these lenses similar in characteristics. So if you're going to use it for filming, it is important to choose the same manufacturer, because the lens coatings will change the skin tones, it will change the image is rendered. And it is for that very reason that we have to consider using the right lenses. The T coating, for example, which is synonymous with Zeiss lenses, has this particular look. And even the filters you buy for these lenses, it should be Zeiss, because that coating, if it changes the characteristics of the way the lens renders images. Now, of course, there's a whole lot of talk about expensive lenses and if they produce any difference. Now, here we have one of the fastest, probably the fastest lens in the market right now. It's a Leica, and it's a 50mm Noctilux at 0.95. 0.95 is a little faster than 1.2, which we found on Canon. But this lens is expensive not only because it's a little faster, but it's because the way it renders the bokeh, the out of focus areas. Now, a lot of the older lenses, if you look at them, it's got the swirly bokehs. They might have cat eyes, they might have kind of distortions, they might have ghosting. A lot of those are handled in the way this lens is manufactured, because this is a very superior lens. It removes almost all distortion. It removes a lot of the chromatic aberration. It removes a lot of the distortion. And that's one of the reasons this lens is so expensive. Now, if you were to compare it to a Canon, would you pay about 4 to 5 times the price of a Canon? So instead of getting 4 of these, you get 1 of these. Well, that will depend a lot on your budget and for your intent. Now, if I'm doing photography and I want to get something very unique, I would use this lens. And this lens will give me a special look, which we call the Leica look. And that is very characteristic of a Leica lens. And some people might say, oh, that's overpriced, that's too high. Well, it will all depend on what you're aiming. And if that little bit of incremental change would mean that it makes your photography look better or your films look better, why not? I mean, if you look at the way the cinema lenses are, for example, they go up to almost $500,000, and $500,000 for a set of lenses, you might say that is a lot of money, but that difference in quality makes the images look superior, and that's why people don't mind paying those high prices, especially if you consider that in a cinema setting you might have up to 4 or 5 cameras, and all those cameras requiring lenses. It would mean that it's a lot of lenses that needs to be rented and must be used. And if you look at that from that perspective, it is a considerable investment. Having said that, I have gotten a lot of requests to talk about lenses that are extremely good quality but are fairly priced. Now here I have a multi-coating Pentacon at it's a very special lens, and I use these lenses, the 50 millimeters, and these lenses are special because they were made in the 60s, and these lenses are fairly cheap. You can buy them $50, $100. They don't have those extremely great coatings that some of the newer lenses have, that reduce a lot of the ghosting, a lot of the diffractions in the light rays. Also, these lenses are not most of the times aspherical. Aspherical lenses remove much of the distortion, but yet they have that unique quality, and that unique quality gives these lenses a special look. And for that very reason, I would always recommend anyone who's inclined to buy these lenses to give them a try, because most of the times when you're trying out different lenses, you are going to say, oh, this looks different, this looks unique, this suits me. For example, if I'm filming a 1960s or 1970s era film, instead of doing much of the work in the post-production, I might go and use one of these lenses to get that particular look. And sometimes these lenses, they don't have as much contrast, they don't have as much saturation, yet that gives that classical look. Because remember, in the old days, the lenses were not as sophisticated as they are today, yet those lenses that were made in the 60s are currently being used. I give you a very good example. One of the great films that was shot recently is the Rogue One, which from the Star Wars. You look at those lenses that were used, they are 1960s lenses, and they are still being used today. And you might wonder, why hasn't anyone gone and bought the new lenses if they perform as well? Well, that look, that special look, is achieved through those lenses. And those same lenses were used in Tarantino's film Hateful Eight. And those lenses give those special characteristics, those looks. So don't think that if you bought a $50 or $100 lens that you're not going to get as good of a look as if you bought a Leica. Because Leica, as I said, has its own look. This has its own look. It's a matter of taste. So whether if you like a special Lamborghini, or if you like a Ferrari, that's of course a high-priced car, but you might as well buy a muscle car, and that's a different feel, that's a different taste. And some might feel that's the way to go and choose. As far as the lenses are concerned, there is no right or wrong lens. What I would always look into the lens is what it is designed to 4. If you are using it to make photography and if you are using it to get a particular look, these lenses work just as good. And remember, now because we have the digital era, you can take your photographs into the Lightroom. You can tweak in any way. You can add saturation, you can add contrast, you can add exposure. One thing you cannot add is sharpness. Really, sharpness, if you play with it, it's not gonna give you that extra look. It will make your photographs digital. But if you are not just about sharpness, then these lenses perform exceptionally well. And especially if you stop down. For example, if you are using a lens and it's a slower lens like a f2.8, don't be shy to stop down to f5.6, because at 5.6, just about all lenses have equal sharpness in the center. And that means that your images are going to be very good. And only if you're pixel peaking are you going to say, oh, that is sharper than the other. And most of the times, if you're filming and you're looking at an image, the image is always moving, and that's why you're not going to have anyone saying, oh, that image doesn't look sharp enough as the other. What will happen is they will see if you have focused right. And focusing is more important than sharpness, because you haven't nailed the focus, then you're going to have a problem. This is the reason, for example, if you're using f1.4 and a 50 millimeter Zeiss, it's a manual lens. You must get the accurate focus. That means you have to enlarge the image and look at it very carefully to see that you have nailed the focus, because it's a very shallow depth of field. In that respect, using an autofocus lens like the Canon will work wonders. And that's the reason you buy an autofocus lens. At times, people have asked me, how would I get to use a 50 millimeter 0.95 lens, for example, on a Sony a7S Mark II at f0.95? Well, that is an important question. If your subject is near and you're trying to hold the focus at 0.95, you're not going to. Even if you have a follow focus guy, or if you have someone who's just, marked it, it is very, very hard because it's such a shallow depth of field. Having said that, if your subject is at infinity or at 50 meters away or 25 meters away, this lens is going to probably hold you for that focus because of the depth of field. But remember, shooting somebody at 50 meters or 25 meters or 50 yards is not the effect that you probably would be looking for. You probably will want to film somebody at 3 meters or 5 meters or 10 meters, and that is like 5 yards or 10 yards at most. And that is very important when you're making these considerations. So choosing the right lens would often mean knowing what you are going to attempt to do. Now, if you are a beginning filmmaker or a cinematographer, it is important that you try out some of the older lenses because your budget will allow it. But don't ever think that you are going to get images that are not as good. Now, the one that we are using is a Tessar Jenna, which is one of the great lenses that was produced by Zeiss before they split up between East Germany and West Germany. And that lens, of course, you might say, well, that is a different look. And that's one of the reasons I'm filming it with that. And the older lenses are now making comeback. You look at Meyer Görlitz, they're coming up those lenses that were now being sold for $50 or $100, and they're repackaging them and selling them for $2,000. Now, those lesser elements, more older look, is making a comeback because that has a character. And that is the first thing you should be looking for. Instead of sharpness, it is the character that the lens renders. And I hope this review has been informative. I hope we have answered some of the questions you have had about 50 millimeters. And I hope this helps you to make a better, more informed decision on your next lens purchase. So, of course, we will ask you if you could kindly like our video. And if you liked our videos, please subscribe to our channel. And if you feel inclined and we would like to bring you more videos and you would like to make a donation, we have a donation information in the description section. Please visit that. And also we have our website, camerareview.ca. You're welcome to visit at any time and subscribe to our newsletter. And I thank you for watching.